whiskeys, at least a third of which will be new, things we've never poured before. So we're excited about that. And then in July, our first July event is up, and that's our Elbows Up Canadian Whiskey Festival, um, featuring a lot of Alberta craft products, but Canadian stuff exclusively. So some fun things coming up in the not too distant future. And I guess some other things I can hint at. We have a new Ben Romick cask arriving tomorrow too. Um, when it rains, it pours. So we're going to try to figure out an idea for a Ben Romick tasting we haven't done, which is going to be hard because we've done a lot of Ben Romick tastings. Um, but we're going to be dropping a new Compass Box tasting as well because there's a trio of 25th anniversary whiskeys that are also arriving tomorrow. So lots of fun stuff happening. Lots to stay tuned for. Check out the Malt Messenger, and tastings will indeed be posted, as will everything, as a matter of fact, on Kensington time. Who needs to hurry though? Like, didn't we went through the whiskey panic of 2020, 21, 22? Like, I mean, maybe sales were crazy back then, but like, do we need to go back to that level of FOMO and insanity?
You remember that as being a whiskey panic, that era.
Yeah. Yeah, it was with whiskeyflation, um, and many other things that are now. I'm hoping we're going to see some whiskey deflation, um, as most companies realize that it's hard to justify charging the prices they want for young whiskey, but not everyone is on the same page yet. Uh, anyway, let's not talk about that. Let's talk about Glenturret. So, why are we excited to do this Glenturret tasting? Because we've never done a vertical of Glenturret, whether in store or online before. And the reason that's possible is that the brand is now being run. It's been run for about 4 years now by the Lalique Group. They bought it from the Edrington Group. Lalique is famous for being the crystal maker that makes those fancy decanters Macallan puts things in, and decanters for Glenturret as well, as a matter of fact. Um, and what's interesting about it, they're higher end expressions, very rare, quite high priced. Their core range stuff, though, the 7 to the 15-year-olds, there's a lot of good value there. We are kind of excited about being able to sample a broad range of things from this distillery. And it's also fair to note that there is not uh, wide distribution on this because the quantities are small. So that's kind of fun and exciting as well. I did just get an email I need to quickly skim, which is relevant, Evan. I don't know if you can kill time for a second and maybe talk about like how few Glenturrets we've seen, because I mean, I know we did that Ruid Moorcast, the peated one, but like we don't see a lot of independent bottlings of it. They've been pretty scarce.
Yeah, so it and for a long time it was independent bottlings was the only way to see Glenturret single malt. Um, there were some official bottlings, I think, here and there, but it's been pretty sporadic. And for a long time, Glenturret was known as the home to the famous grouse experience and not as its own distillery up until the ownership changed up until they were sold by Edrington. It is cool to see that they've been, at least on this side of the pond, I'm not sure what it is like in Europe, but a little bit conservative with how much they've released, and they haven't done the typical we're gonna like flood the market with 1 million bottles, but then pretend it's rare kind of thing that we do see from other companies.
Yeah, well, I mean, just to sort of add to that, Evan, I think there's a sensitivity to the fact that even for their core range, the 7 to the 15-year-old, which we're going to dive into in a moment, I promise. Um, they're not the least expensive whiskeys of their respective price points, but they're not the most expensive either, far from it. But I think what they've tried to recognize is that they have a limited amount. They're also very aggressively embracing the fact that they're different batches. Every time they do a release, which I believe is once a year, there's a vintage on it, so you know which one you've got. Things like the 15, I think we've got another case coming in tomorrow, and that's it. We won't see any more again likely this year. We won't see it until they do a 2025 release. So they are legitimately limited, but they're still, the prices are reasonable. The ones I've tried so far, I've been impressed with. I mean, I've nosed a few of the ones tonight. People are probably salivating, so we should probably crack on this, and then we can add to it as we go. Um, but I'm excited about this. ABVs 40, 46, 48, 4, 44. What's the lowest one in the tasting? I think it's the old ones at 25 and 30 years, and we'll get to those in a minute. And we're starting with the peated ones. Evan, you set up the lineup tonight. Tell us the rationale.
Yeah, so Kurt had sort of alluded to this where I thought maybe going for a narrative might be the fun way to go. We've seen some peated stuff, and actually, I think that in a lot of cases, a lot of us have had more of the peated Glenturret recently at a younger age than we've seen of any of the older stuff or the unpeated stuff from Glenturret, especially if you're into the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society or have seen our or tried our berries bottling or anything like that. So that kind of is a new school in my mode of thinking on this one. That's why I put the peated ones out front, and then we're
Hmm.
going to slowly delve into the more traditional side of Glenturret after that.
Hmm. All right. Well, let me put it up on the screen here. We're starting with the 7-year-old. Uh, this is the 2024 release, which because I believe we finally sold out of the 2023. Matured in American oak with a little bit of European oak, bottled at 46%, a peated Glenturret. All of them come in these decanters, which are unique bottles. I mean, in some ways, they are both elegant and perhaps a nod back to old school Scottish attempts at looking cutting edge. You know, Kurt, like you've been around like in the like drinking whiskey like me for a long time. I mean, there was a period where like I think the Scots figured out the branding stuff about 20 years ago, or well, about 15, 12 to 15 years ago. But before that, when they were trying to go classy and high end, they often just kind of looked a little dumpy and tired.
So I heard, Kurt, you're really old, so you probably get what I'm saying here.
They're equally old. Well, slightly less old than I am, actually.
By
Marginally
a
less.
couple months, days.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, for sure. Uh, this is one of those few bespoke bottles because I'm not a big fan of bespoke glass. This is one of the ones that actually has a little bit of appeal to me. I wish they'd be slightly more conservative with its usage, but I think they've actually got a pretty decent this time. The previous three bottle core range they had was a little bit milk toast to say the least. So definitely up their game here.
Hmm. All right.
Yeah, I
Oh,
like how it is sort of a classy looking bottle, and then there's almost like a starkness to the label itself. They haven't gone right off the hop with, I think they have at the 40 and 50-year level, which we're not getting into, but they haven't gone off and like put the 30-year-old in some weird ass decanter or tried to go the Macallan route on that end of things yet.
well, you gotta get to the fancy decanters, and I have a story to tell about those fancy decanters when we get to them. So what do we think about this? Like right away on the nose, you can see some of those faintly medicinal, like quite ashy peat notes, like a little bit of a latex. I mean, the nice thing is there's a rubbery note, but it's a clean rubber. It's not like I know for some of you who haven't been on one of our tastings before, this might come off a little sideways, but like used catheter tubes, stuff like that, are the kinds of things that get bandied about in some of these tastings. But it's kind of got like a fresh Band-Aid or like a like kind of a new latex rubbery note to it.
It's going into full on McDonald's chicken McNuggets dipped in McDonald's barbecue sauce on the nose for me.
Mhm.
Oh, fun.
Special sauce. It smells like plum, but there's probably no plums in it.
Yeah.
I get a little bit of like unlit menthol cigarette there and Play-Doh.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I would for a second I was gonna toss in a little bit of like gas station jujubes in your latex gloves. By which, if no one knows what I mean, it's like back in the time before they put them in a hermetically sealed bag, you could go into the gas station while your dad was filling up with gas, put in a quarter, and get a handful of not very clean jujubes.
How was that ever a thing? Roast peanuts and
I mean, the
everything.
thing, man, Husky stations, they had them all the time. Man,
Yeah, I
I
think
on the tip of
they
that.
actually stopped making those, or they had to remove those during the Great Whiskey Boom of 2020 to 2022.
Yeah, I think they were removed from gas stations about 30 years ago. That 7-year old is a beast on the palate. It is absolutely massive. Um, I can't believe it's just 46% because there is just such a concentration of flavor, especially peat. Hickory notes, like tons of malt. I mean, no surprise there. It's only 7 years old. You expect you're going to get a ton of malted barley in there. But man, that is a full-on peated malt.
It's a
It's got
little Lachey.
it's Yeah, and spicy as well, which seems to be their MO.
Sorry, Kurt, what were you going to say?
A little bit Lachegi, and black licorice too.
The black licorice I get. Yeah, there's some tarry tones. Again with the ashy peat mixed with those gas station jujubes. Because those fruit tones are like hiding in there underneath. Um, I mean, the only thing I would say about the Lecheg comparison is I, I'm not, as inclined to like Lecheg as much as I actually, for some reason, like this really intense. I would love to know what the phenols in the barley are for this because it has got to be somewhere in the Ardbeg territory, like 55 to 60 ppm.
I just have to clarify something there, Andrew. You know, when we talk about something like a Aromic or a Aurora, and we talk about
Yeah.
like notes of cow shit or something, that doesn't mean that I've tasted that or want to taste that or that that's like the exact flavor I'm drinking. Of course, that's not the case. So when I say it's kind of Lechegi, I don't mean it's as bad as I think Lecheg is. I just mean there's just to the growth.
There we go, tossing Lecheg under the bus once more.
Yeah, we knew it was a compliment. It's
Yeah.
Not just tossed under the bus, but like back over in a second.
I'm just having a quick look at the brand handbook for this, and there is no mention of how heavily peated it is. I think it's fair to say like this doesn't have like an Isla coastal peat, like it's not salty. This has got to be some sort of Highland peat, but it's just the concentration of it. Like this is, you know, when a Speyside distillery goes heavily peated, or just a Highland one, I don't know. I don't remember them often being this intense. Like I think, I guess overall, I'm just kind of impressed by it. Was not expecting this. Anyway, any other thoughts on that,
I like the nose better than the
uh,
palate.
Evan?
yeah, I can see that. It does. I think there is a bit more going on in the nose. It's just a bit of peat and turf and spice for me more on the or on the palate versus the nose, which is the nose being more expressive, but
Mhm.
it's kind of runs a gamut. Like it's got a lot of like peated Highland malt, sort of Ardmore-ish style, but it does have those more iodine sort of coastal influence notes to it as well on the nose.
Well, Evan, I was going to say, I thought you'd like this because it is Ardmore-esque, but it's like
Hmm.
Ardmore, with more effort. Like it's
Yeah.
trying, you know, I I don't know, like everything about this is so much bigger than any Ardmore, young Ardmore I can think I've ever had in my life.
Yeah. I think Ian Snow would probably disagree with you. It's too bad he's not on here, but I think he would describe it as like Ardmore is the fat tire bike, and then Glenturret's the fat tire bike where you put training wheels on the Peat.
Just because you mean because it's not dirty enough?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or
Well,
to me,
what's interesting, go ahead, Kurt.
I was going to say Ardmore to me is always like a bit of over steep and leathery kind of notes, very kind of earthy.
Mhm.
This is just a
Mhm.
little bit more naked. It's kind of like you tried to make Isla without it having that, like you said, that Isla style saline note as much of the medicinal aspect. It's
Yeah.
kind of like, what can we do to make Isla?
Yeah. Well, and I think, Kurt, that's a great point. So Ruid Moor, which means big red, which is the name of what they call their peated spirit when they trade it off. Curiously, they're not doing that here with their official bottlings. Um, it was originally produced under Edrington for black grouse. I mean, prior to that, they weren't making peated spirit at Glenturret. So, um, and what's interesting, and I think what we're going to talk about, which is not part of the official story, is kind of that famous grouse story and how it ties into a bunch of other things. Because, we've got a cask of Berry Brothers whiskey at the shop at the shop right now that we all really love, that almost certainly has Glenturret in it. And again, a lot of this goes back to that early days of the current whiskey boom or the current whiskey cycle, because I think we can all probably say we're past the boom phase. We're at the trying to figure out if it's leveling out or falling off a cliff phase. Um, but when Famous Grouse was part of Edrington and trying to figure out what the future was, they were putting whiskey into casks to be bottled as blended malts and older blends in the future. And then they scrapped all that because the market wanted single malts. And peated Glenturret was produced to make the peated version of Famous Grouse, the black grouse, but also to be included in blends. And the reality is, Glenturret has never been very large. It's a relatively small distillery, 500,000 liters a year of production. Production is kind of constrained by the fact they have an open top mash tun that's essentially just a big cast iron vat. I think there's some photos I can show you a little later. And the one thing I remember about it, which I believe is still there, is they have to stir it by hand. So someone has to physically stir it with an oar to turn the mash at Glenturret. So there's some things that are really traditional and old school about it, but I think they are in the process of updating some of that and modernizing it because they want to make it a modern single malt brand. And I hope they continue producing the peated spirit, because even though I don't know that I would drink a lot of this at 7 years of age, it's got some merit and it shows a bunch of promise. And I'm interested to see how it does at 10 years of age. So this is the 10-year-old peated Glenturret. So I'll pop that thing up on the screen here in just a second.
Jeff's got some numbers on the screen for us, but I think probably most people in the room would agree there's no way this would be the 17 to 20 ppm.
Yeah, it can't be.
If for no other reason than the acridness of the back end. I think they've probably gone a little bit long into the run, and the phenols are quite mighty.
One
I think you're
one
probably way person.
one other kind of devil's advocate note on that, though, would be that how do we know they were consistent prior to Lalique taking over in the peated malt they were using in the first place? Because it was always intended to go into blends. It was never intended to be bottled as single malt up until Lalique bought them. And just before Lalique bought them, you guys will recall there was those hideously ugly Glenturret bottles that came out, I believe, during the brief period that Douglas Lang was sort of bottling them and exporting them as a single malt. And so they had it back then as well. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a huge variance in terms of the phenols up until the point that Lalique took over. And probably at that point, or maybe slightly before, is when they hopefully put a bit of consistency in there. But even if they didn't, I think that could be fun too. It'd be fun to see. You never know how much peat you're going to get until you give it a whirl.
That acquisition was like just before this, wasn't it, Andrew? Like 2018 or 2019 or something?
Yeah,
Or like just after this, sorry.
2019 bought the distillery. The leak bought the distillery. So if you wind it back, this 7-year-old would have been produced probably 2016, 2017, something like that.
Probably more Wild West.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to that 10-year-old. Um, I think we haven't updated the site, but I think we actually are on the 2024 of this at the shop now. Um, that is one of the challenges about having these things where they do change it from one batch to the next. Nevertheless, 48.4% refill American and European oak casks is the makeup on this. Same bottle, but a little bit higher ABV and 3 further years aging. And this is quite different now. I'd say it's more in the Jelly Bellies range than in the gas station Jujubes range on the nose.
definitely bigger, better fruits on this. The
Mhm.
doughy notes are a little bit more pleasant too, not quite as off. You can see the DNA, but this is way, way, way more elegant.
It's had more time to soften out. The sherry,
It's definitely softer, peat wise for me.
the sherry also seems a little more prominent, whereas in the last one, when I go back to it, reminds me a little bit of almost even like American single malts on the nose in terms of that barnyardy mix along with like kind of honey and vanilla tones. Whereas this is more kind of tart, rich, dried fruit. How's the palate, guys? I think you're a little ahead of me.
I don't love the palate. It's still got that kind of acrid burnt note for me. And I a question maybe, Andrew. I don't know how geeky you've ever got with this, or Evan, when you've been on distillery tours. Um, a lot of times when we think of that dirty back end, we talk about going deeper into the cut, pulling more of the faints at the back end and stuff into it, those fusel oils and such. Do you think they're possibly burning hotter too and ending up with different chemical compounds? Like Springbank does a really, really slow, low smoking. Kilhoman does or did anyways. I don't know if they still do. But there's an acridness to this sort of style that I kind of struggle with. I'm wondering if they're getting different chemical compounds.
Well, I mean, you'd be getting a different chemical compound depending on, I think, the type of peat you're using, but also, I guess to your point as well, how you do it. I mean, Springbank is obviously using it in their kiln. This is going to be from a maltings facility. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it could
That
be.
might speak to it too, though, right? If it's coming from a maltings facility, the demand on what they're doing is going to be a lot heavier. They'd have to be doing everything faster. So you'd probably be peat smoking in a much shorter window than you would at somewhere like Springbank.
Well, I mean, the peat smoke phase is probably done at a, I don't know if it would be much shorter because I think the barley needs to be smoked by the smoke for a long enough time for the phenols to attach to it. I don't know that you can rush that, but you're right. Once it then becomes the drying point, I mean, commercial malting plants are not going to be burning peat to dry it. They'll be using presumably gas, and you know, depending on how fast you do that, I suppose you could burn it. But I mean, you'd think that what that would more likely lead to is like a caramelization effect, more like a caramel malt and beer, like that sort of thing. I
I
I think.
think
Sorry, go ahead.
I think we've talked about this a couple times, and I've seen some people in the room here kind of nod their head times when I talk about this about younger peated whiskeys nowadays. They don't quite seem the same anymore. There seems to be a little bit of a sharper back end to them, a lot of rubber and a lot of in the back end.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure what's changed in terms of production methodology, but I think what I really struggle with, just as using this whiskey as an example, as soon as I picked it up, I'm like, man, that nose is really pretty. Um, the fruits are bigger. It's more like rounded. It's a better balance than the first one, but the palate still carries some of that sharp blackness.
Mhm. Jeff dropping some controversial comments in the chat. Uh, I mean, to be honest, I don't mind the palate on this one. The first one was a little bit rough for me. I find this one's got some more balance to it. I will acknowledge, I think the peat's got a rougher edge to it, but there's also a clientele of people that like that. Honestly, you know, we've done some Octomore tastings, and I know that my revelation from the last Octomore tasting is that I don't think I actually like Octomore. I mean, there was one of the six whiskeys where I was like, wow, that's really good. And most of them were like, okay, I get it. Um, I find this in some ways more drinkable than a lot of those Octomores.
You're not wrong. I hate to say it, but More has been an easy whiskey to fall out of the last couple of years.
Hmm. Yeah,
Pricing hasn't helped, but I think the teal police are going to come after both of you.
well, I mean, just give us some Port Charlotte for God's sake with an age statement on it. I mean, that's all we've been asking
Yes,
for.
I'll come
Um,
out as a defender of that and say I absolutely will scream Port Charlotte from the rooftops for their sake. if I were them, I would be putting way more effort to.
Yeah. Um, I like that more, I think, than the 7-year-old. I think it's got a decent balance to it. I think there's a market for that. And again, this is something we talk about when we do these tastings. Bottles like this 7 and 10-year-old are not, well, especially you and I, Kurt, are not for guys like you and I, because there's we're chasing different dragons, as it were, in the whiskey world. But for people that like peated malts, I mean, I think these would be a fun alternative for them, to dip their toes in. Uh, all right, let's go. Before we go into something different, maybe just touch on a few things I had intended to mention right at the start of the tasting, including, uh, a little bit about the distillery being, um, you know, it certainly one of the oldest in Scotland. This is the thing with all these kind of claims, is that, you know, uh, there's a number of distilleries that could claim to be the oldest in Scotland. There is some good evidence on Glenturret's side, and I think that the industry as a whole would probably largely side with the distillery on this one, that it is likely the oldest distillery in Scotland, dating from, I believe, 1763. There was a distillery called Thorough. They know this because there were documents, from the owner, that turned up, actually in some death records, and that's how they traced it back. Prior to this, I think they thought that it dated from the 1770s, when there was more, uh, documented evidence of the distillery operating. It also operated under the name Hosh. Um, Now, having said all this, like a lot of other distilleries, Glenturret has not operated uninterrupted since the 1760s. There's been periods where it opened and closed, and, there's a nice little shot of it there in the little valley, near Crieff, where the distillery is located. Um, it operated on and off for a period of time. But what's more interesting to me about it is just that this is a distillery that's managed to stay fairly traditional, um, right up until the current day, because it's never really been expanded greatly. So yeah, 1775, an illicit distillery named Hosh, was there. And then 1818, I think, is probably when we can trace the current distillery back, um, to the current site, with an owner by the name of John Drummond. But we won't bore you with too much of that, because we're all here really to sample the whiskey. But what is interesting to just think about is that this is one of the oldest distilleries in Scotland. And the reason I like to say one of is that when you go back this far, when records were not what they are today, no one really knows for sure. I mean, I love the fact that, Glenfarclas, which officially opened in 1836, might also have been operating as far back as 1765, because there's a painting depicting a farm that looks a lot like a distillery that was the forebearer to what is now Glenfarclas Distillery operating. So we just don't know. But it is a distillery that's got incredible heritage to it. Um, and that 1763 founding date is a hell of a lot more credible than Bushmills claims at 1608. And yes, I slid that in there just because I wanted to, because why not? Um, shall we move on to the triple distilled? Sorry, triple cast, not triple distilled. I'm gonna confuse the hell out of people there. Triple wood, triple cask, bottled 44%. This Glenturret matured in ex bourbon, as well as sherry seasoned American and European oak casks. So what do we think of triple wood? I suppose triple wood, like the 7 year, is kind of the introductory. They are the stepping stone malts in the brand.
They stole the name from.
It has a bit of that uh cinnamon oatmeal sherry kind of combination that I was getting on the 10-year peated right off the nose there.
Well, it's also got a little bit of those gas station jujubes from the 7-year-old, with a bit of malted milk.
Hmm.
So now we're into in theory, the unpeated, although you never know. Maybe there's a little bit of a crossover, but this should be the unpeated Glenturret style.
This is miles better than the last range thing. Holy cow. Somebody's doing good things there.
It is a really nice palate. Like there's good fruit notes there. It's maybe a little bit tight, but it's not like crazily overwooded or anything like that for me.
Yeah, it's young. I mean, I think that's really apparent. Like this is probably 7 or 8 year old spirit. Um, there's a fair bit of malt, but the malt isn't like overbearing. There are some nice fruits there. It's delicate. I mean, I'd like to see this personally bottled a little higher. I think 44, it's drinking just a touch weak, but overall, the palate on this is quite nice.
That's a whiskey that's kind of almost a little bit frustrating. It makes sense because it's really well made. The nose on that's really, really good, but it doesn't seem like it was right. It seems like when you bite into a fruit, it needs a few more days. And
Yeah.
I think that you're right, Andrew. It drinks really, really quite young, but
Mhm.
it's not in a way, it's no different than a lot of the young distilleries, the new distilleries, where we're like, okay,
Mhm.
that's not necessarily going to reach for it very often. It just needs more time. I would say this maybe should have.
But I think the counter to that would be like this is, maybe for the brand, this is the entry level dram, the stepping stone dram for their brand. And, you know, it's not far off some of those young, like 10, 12-year-old distillery releases. I think, yeah, it could stand to be just a touch more mature, but what's there is nice. You can see those sherry tones, you can see the American oak. One of the things about the spirit from Glenturret is that it's generally considered to be fairly light and slightly acidic, which is something that probably works with longer maturations. I mean, you want that acidity to settle down a bit over time. So I think with both this and the 7-year-old, I mean, that's one of the similarities I see in the two of them. And maybe that's where that gas station choo-choo note comes from, is that it's fruity, but there's like this kind of there's this slightly acidic nature to it too.
That's a great point because acid um, enhances a lot of flavor, just like salt does and stuff, right? So if there's some intensity to eat on the back end, like what I'm kind of struggling with, it could
Mhm.
be also because the spirit itself is quite acidic. So
Yeah.
could be jacking that up and changing.
Well, just I think to use that wine parallel, I mean, if you want a mature wine, especially like certain wines like white wine, you need sugar and acid to kind of make that work well. And I'm sure there's some truth to that in whiskey, but more that acid's going to sort of settle down a little bit over time and get rounded out, things added to it. Um, but yeah, it's, it's very decent. I think it shows like the spirit is well made. Yeah, it's too young for me. So,
But
It
it is
it kind of reminds me of pre-10-year-old Aaron when we were getting it on the market. And
yeah.
um I mean that in the kind of in a positive fashion where it seems like maybe this is like the regime change whiskey or getting to it with the new ownership and stuff. Who knows? But it seems to be the spirit that's going in the right direction for sure.
Mhm. Okay. Well, let's step it up a little bit age-wise. We're going to go into the 12-year-old. Uh, so with the 12-year-old, this is definitely the 2024 batch, matured in PX and Oloroso sherry seasoned European and American oak. Now, obviously, being a distillery that was once part of the Edrington Group, they would have probably, these are essentially Macallan casks. These are probably from the same cooperages that Macallan works with. They would have 12-year-old whiskey. This would have been filled well before the current owners took over. I'm assuming that some of those relationships have stayed since then. Um, but interesting, that they talk about, and this is, I think, one of the things that I like about what they're doing here is talking about American and European oak sherry. I mean, a lot of companies that are using sherry casks just say sherry
Full
and they don't
stop. Yeah.
qualify it. I mean, it's nice to know here that they're being a little bit more transparent about the type of oak, because both American and European oak are being used to season sherry casks. It's a little
You
dumpy.
know, I'd like to try this up against like the Macallan 12-year-old double oak, um, and the Tamdu 12. I think it's probably would go favorably versus both of those.
Yeah. A
Could be
battle,
wrong though.
a battle of the X's.
Yeah,
Because I mean,
that would
what
be actually
Evan,
that would be a cool tasting. Could throw some Glengoyne in there too.
yeah, Edrington's checkered past.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, what Evan's sort of leading on to there is that Tamdu, along with Glenturret, used to be part of the Edrington group. When you go to Tamdu today, they will tell you flat out that their casks are more like Macallan's casks used to be than Macallan's are today. And yeah, Glenturret, Tamdu, Glengoyne, all formerly part of that Edrington group of companies. But anyway, the nose on this is nice. You know, I find it's a touch closed, and I think that's just because the sherry in this is kind of tight right off the bat, and maybe it needs to open up a little bit. I'm sure there's going to be a bit more on the palate, but right now I'm just getting like these syrupy tones, lots of dark chocolate, those classic dried fruits like raisin, date, figs. Um, it's soft, but I'm not getting a ton else right off the bat on the nose.
I'm struggling to see the DNA here, like, and in a good way, because I've been rather underwhelmed with Glenturret for quite some time. Um, I don't know if I would peg this as Glenturret, and I mean that in the most incredibly complimentary way.
Mhm. I mean, I don't know how I could tell you what the DNA of Glenturret is, partly just because I've not had a ton of experience with it. And, I know Jeff made reference to there having been a lot of Scotch Malt Whiskey Society Glenturret bottlings. I've not tried all of them. I mean, I think for me, when I think of Glenturret, the whiskeys that really impressed me were some of those old signatory bottlings from the 1980s that
Yeah.
were all like ex bourbon or just ex refill hoggies that were kind of tropical. So like I don't know if I could tell you what that Glenturret DNA is, other than maybe probably something not far off the profile of that triple wood if you strip out some of those kind of leather tobacco tones coming from those firmer sherry notes.
I was going to bring up those old Glenturrets. I don't know if you recall, Andrew, when we were in your suite in Victoria, I brought one of those signatory 87 Glenturrets and we cracked.
Mm-hmm.
There's something on the nose here that reminds me of a juvenile version of that one, but I honestly can't think of another Glenturret that is like any. So,
Yeah.
and we've already talked a little bit about a couple of ones later in the range, not because I tasted them, but just heard them. So I'm kind of rethinking. I don't think I know Glenturret at this point.
I don't know. I don't know that anyone here does. I mean, because we just haven't had that much experience with it. Um, the palate on this, very drinkable. The sherry, I think it's nice and balanced. No rough edges to it. There's no flaws. Like this is a very clean profile sherry. It's new school. Like this is modern sherry seasoned casks, but it's very well done modern sherry seasoned casks. But I think Evan, your Tamdu analogy is an interesting one because this does seem to be leaning a little bit more in the Tamdu direction than it does in the Macallan direction.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And I'm trying to see here. I'm assuming because it's 46.4, they're not chill filtering.
They're not.
It doesn't say it on the bottle from what I can see, but yeah, it's got like some oiliness that's going more into Tamdu territory.
Mhm.
Tamdu, I think, from what I recall, goes into a bit more of a honeyed sort of a honeyed toffee note to it for me, whereas this one it's a little bit lighter on that end, but has these nice chocolatey sort of caramel fruity notes to it that I quite like. I
So
agree though, super balanced.
uh disappointingly, they got rid of the hand stirred mash tun. I suppose you can't really fault them for that because I can't imagine it was necessarily all that efficient. Um, but they have a long fermentation here, which is interesting. Like we're talking 100 to 120 hours, which is those are very long fermentations. There's not a lot of legacy distilleries in Scotland, save maybe the likes of like Ben Romick. Uh, I don't know if Ben Nevis would be included in that, but you don't see a lot of distilleries going into long, long fermentations like that. And I think that's probably where some of those nice fruit tones come in that we were talking about before, and that like little bit of probably some of that acidity as well.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Trying to find there was a good photo here of that hand stirred. Anyway, we'll keep the show on the road. I'll keep looking for that when there's time. Move ready to move on to the 15-year-olds.
Hmm. Yeah, nice ABV on this one too.
Yeah, 50.8. Let me put her up on the screen. Where's the 15? So yeah, I think this is the one I mentioned that when the current inventory that we're getting, which we've got 6 bottles arriving tomorrow. Once these have come and gone, I believe that is it for this year for the 15. So I'll put it in the chat and pop her up on screen. So once more, PX and Oloroso sherried American and European oak casks bottled at 50.8%.
That 4.4% alcohol and the 3 years difference, just it's so much chewier, or noses as it's going to be chewier, stylistically.
Yeah, it's
More
thicker.
leather notes coming through.
Like the prominent note for me, it's a chocolate note, but it's not like commercial chocolate. It reminds me of like cocoa nibs, like raw cocoa
Hmm.
nibs.
Yeah, it
You're muted if you were.
I realized as I said it. It's a little bit boozy and fermenty still too, though, in all the right ways, because
mhm.
those are sangy, tangy tropical kind of notes I like.
Yeah,
Not
there's some
quite tropical yet, but just sour tang.
yeah, there's some tart fruit notes in there. A
Yeah,
little bit.
that sort of like funky sourness does follow on the palate as
There's
well.
there's just a faint touch of like a hotel swimming pool, like slightly over chlorinated.
Yeah, I can kind of see like being in the pool room, kind of see that smell in the air. See that smell in the air?
Well, it's like
Synesthesia.
if you're at a Holiday Inn that has a water slide and you're going down the water slide with your kids. Um, and I'm not again, Evan says this all the time, not in a bad way. Like to me,
No,
it's
not at all.
just reminds me of that. I mean, I if there's a water slide, I'm gonna go down it.
Well,
So
as a hockey and ringette dad, I can see where you're coming from because I'm at those water slides a lot at tournaments, and it's you can even smell the booze coming off of all the parents' coffee mugs
that's for sure.
and travel mugs, where it's like hot chocolate dosed with Baileys and
Yeah.
every other concoction that they could get away with.
So really it's an over chlorinated swimming pool with a touch of Bailey's, is I think what we're
That's
getting.
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
I feel seen right now. I'm sure some of the other parents.
Oh man. Yeah, it's a really lively sherried whiskey on the palate, some nice spices there, some nice fruit, chocolate tones, little leather, little tobacco, really balanced and quite drinkable, even at that strength. Like that's got a nice elegance to it. Again, more that of that new school modern style sherry, but very much in the realm of some of those older Tamdus, Glengoynes, and Macallans.
The palate to me, uh, there's a little bit of breadiness still. It comes across almost like you made slightly overdone toast with thinnest layer of Marmite and then a big smear of jam. So
Mhm. Yeah.
good finish on that too. Great palate
Yeah.
weight.
You know what's interesting is you can get both the nuttiness from the Oloroso and that sweetness, that syrupy note from the PX as well. Um, quite nice. Before we move on to the big ones, there's a few pictures here I can share of the Aberturret Estate House, which is also part of the Glenturret estate. Now, if you are one of those people that are fortunate enough to have endless reserves of money and the ability to purchase uber rare trophy bottles, some of those bottles actually come with a complimentary stay at the Aberturret House. And one of the things that is interesting about um, Glenturret is one of its claims to fame is it's the only distillery in Scotland with a Michelin star restaurant. Um, Although I'm sure Macallan is pushing hard to catch up on that. Uh, but I believe if you purchase anything like it could be the 50-year-old or somewhere in that range. So there are some higher end ones here. I'm going to share my screen in just a moment that we don't have that are available for order, like the 35-year. Come on, pop up. There you go. You can see the 35-year-old, or these guys, which are in Lalique decanters, like the 50-year-old, the Provenance or the Prowess. Um, I believe the 50-year-old, but possibly the Provenance and the Prowess also come with invitations to go to the distillery. So kind of cool. Yeah, Tala, who's the rep who's on the tasting tonight, saying all of them include a distillery package. Um, and yeah, older ballings, no age statements on some of them, but well-reviewed spirit. Having said that, let's keep going on this. We've got 25 and 30 to go through here. Now I know we had to do a little bit of sleuthing here at the start because I wasn't paying close enough attention and I got the 25 and 30 order slightly mixed up, but I believe we determined the 25 is slightly darker and a slightly richer whiskey as well than the 30, and that's where we're going to go to next. So, oh, yeah, before I do that, while you're nosing that, before we dive in, this is the Aberturret Guest House. Um, there you go. Looks nice. Nice little sitting area there. Very modern. Oh, who doesn't want to sit in a copper bathtub? Anyway, not far from either Edinburgh or Glasgow. I think it's a little over an hour's drive, maybe an hour and 10 minutes up into the Highlands. Nevertheless, that's kind of cool. So what else have we got here for you? I've got the 25-year-old. So Kurt, Evan, you're a little ahead of me. A marriage of whiskeys from first and second fill, American and European oak. I think we can all say their sherry is what they would have added. These are ex-sherry seasoned casks. But what do we think of the 25-year-old?
How
Man,
much time do you have? This is 1000% my jam. This is the kind of whiskey I've been waiting for a long time, and I can't believe it's coming out of.
the
I'm
the
bowled
nose on
over by
this is spectacular.
spectacular, utterly spectacular.
It still has that long fermentation time funkiness to it as well. Like there's a really weird note of like if you've ever had grilled romaine lettuce,
Yeah,
for me.
yeah. Are you thinking like one of those fancy like wasabi Caesar salads?
Yeah. Yeah, or like wilted lettuce even that you've left in the fridge kind of thing and then ate it.
There,
It's got this old vegetal note.
there's some licorice here for sure, but I mean, what I love about this is that older school, very tropical style of sherry. The one this reminds me the most of, Kensington did a 1972 Glenglaza cask in, I want to say around 2012, 2013. It was a 39-year-old. And this reminds me of that Glenglaza, that almost 40-year-old Glenglaza on the nose. And that's quite a compliment to have something, 25 years, have just the intensity, the complexity of something even older than that with these really old school delicate sherry tones too.
But that, in fairness, that noses and drinks way older than 25. Like that, I would blindly probably peg that in the high 30s.
In the what, sorry?
In the high 30s, 40 years old. Like,
Oh,
I don't know, man. That's crazy.
it's juicy, it's tropical, there's a nice elegance to it. I was a little nervous about these just because of the ABV. I mean, getting close to 40, um, I'd be really curious to know, and I'm just kind of quickly scanning this here. Like I'd really like to know like if these are somewhat natural ABVs that they came down to on their own, or if they were diluted to these strengths for bottling, because I mean, it doesn't feel like it's lost anything even with that lower ABV here.
There's things on the palate that do remind me of those, or at least the last signatory Glenturret 88 that I tried.
Hmm.
There's also, I guess, sister distillery in a way. It kind of reminds me of the old 70s Ben Riex a little bit too, but they tended to have a little bit more higher power to them, like higher ABVs. But there's some of those notes I remember from the 70s.
Hmm. So what's interesting, I'm just looking, the 2023 and 2022 release of the Glenturret 25 were all at different ABVs. So I mean, these could be just really low ABV bottlings. I would be really interested to know if these are natural strength or if they've been diluted. I mean, those really intense tropical notes kind of would make sense if these are extremely oxidized spirits, which again would make sense if it's that lower ABV. And maybe the bottling criteria here are deciding what to leave for the 30 year, what to leave for the 35 or the 50 or the other bottlings that they have is partly the strength. I mean, one of the things that we've talked about in tastings before is when you go to bottle, you can lose up to 1% just through the bottling process. So if your spirit's already at 40.9, you might be out of luck. It might be too weak to actually be still legally whiskey by the time you bottle it. And that really intense tropical fruity profile could kind of make sense if this is spirit that maybe is from casks that had lost a bit more strength and were at a lower ABV.
Didn't we have somebody on one of our tastings, Andrew? I want to say Angus, but I'm not married to the idea of it being Angus. That talked about a little bit of leeway they have for ABV in terms of they know in bottling there's a little bit of a wiggle room. So even if it falls slightly under, they're
Tell,
still
tell
just.
that to the LCBO with Wolfburn.
I'm more thinking SWA and
Yeah,
Scottish regulations.
I mean, there might be. I have a vague recollection of that, but I mean that was surprising. I remember when I was at Gordon MacPhail's production facility and warehouse and bottling line, and that was the first time I'd ever heard that you can lose strength at bottling. So it's something you kind of have to factor in, and it does make you wonder. All the ones where they claim it's at the decimal point, like this is the ABV, is it? Like if we were to get out a hydrometer and test it ourselves, would we get the same number?
All that 40% alcohol whiskey out there that's not actually whiskey.
Yeah, and I'm sure, I mean, I'm sure excise around the world, if you're within a decimal or two of your stated percentage, they don't care. Like it's,
Mhm.
there's a real, but like I think full points is a whole other matter rather than just,
Even if it's point one though, does that mean you guys are going to come into the shop one morning and I will have snuck in at night with a Sharpie and crossed the word whiskey off on all the 40% bottles just in case they
spirit
fell?
Just write spirit in big block letters.
Spirit drink.
That's right. That's right.
Well,
It's all old Alfords now.
Yeah.
I almost don't want to move on from that. Um, it's gorgeous. I wish it was half the price because I mean, I'd love a bottle of that, but man, that's a nice whiskey. Uh,
Mhm.
should we move on to the 30-year-old?
No.
All right.
Sorry, Andrew. I probably missed it. What was the price on that one?
1700, I believe. Yes,
Yep.
1699.99.
Definitely an ouch price, but definitely a beautiful whiskey. That's one for the ages.
Well, it is one of those prices where, we've said this before, we'll say it again. I mean, whether or not these are the places where prices like these land in the long term for companies will be interesting to see because I mean, Glenrothes 25-year-old is about the same price. Granted, I don't think it's anywhere near as good as that Glenturret bottling, but it's not selling. So I mean, at some point, companies I think are going to have to potentially adjust. So moving on here, we have got the 30-year-old. So a little bit different here. We've still got European oak, Oloroso, and PX, but we've also got a port pipe or a portion of port pipe here too. 300 total bottles. So I suppose that's the other thing to acknowledge about this. I mean, even if you were to compare to things like Glengoyne 30 or Glengoyne 25, which maybe the price points are slightly better, the global volumes they're releasing of these are tiny. Like 300 bottles around the world is really not very much. Um, but let's dive in here. ABV slightly lower even this time, 40.6%. And I think you get that port note coming off right off the bat.
Totally. It's purple.
Evan's right. Purple.
Yeah.
Yeah. Purple fruits of some kind, purple everything. It just smells purple.
Well, it's got that like that musty dunnage note, and I think it's
Yeah.
kind of um sort of emphasized even more because of those port casks, which again are also dunnage warehouses. They're musty, that nice little bit of chocolate in there. I've said this before, port can be very hit or miss for me, but on the
Definitely.
nose on this is like another solid, lovely nose.
It's a little bit drier than I expected based on the nose, but I think in a good way.
I haven't hit the palate yet, but the nose has got this nice like blue cheese with a bit of honeycomb note on it.
Oh, good call. Hmm.
The palate is
Oh,
muscular, like it's big, loads of leather tobacco, nice dark chocolate tones in there too. It's juicy. Man, I mean, there's a nice weight to the spirit too. Despite being 40.6%, like this has got a nice big robust palate to it.
grape juice and eucalyptus or mint or something.
Mhm.
Palate.
There is a nice mintiness to it,
Yeah, I agree with the grape juice. You almost, I was thinking more like the grape flavored Tylenol or Advil's children's version.
which pairs well with the aftermath of a hotel water slide night.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
because you
have
got to
for
get them
both
ready
mentioned
for
before.
got to get them
parent
ready
and
for the
child.
game the
Yeah,
next day.
yeah.
I don't know if I've said this note on a tasting here, but I did say it at some point before. I remember being sick in Scotland once and grabbing, they were like blackberry halls. I had nasty.
Hmm.
There's something that's a little bit blackberry halls.
Mm-hmm. Let's see that.
Yeah, does have that cooling note to it on the nose even.
Man, those are bangers, those two.
Yeah.
Well done. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Going back to the 25, it noses like with so much more buttery notes and butterscotch to it. Almost a French toast note to it.
Without going back to something that was bottled 30 years ago, 20 years ago, I can't remember the last time I loved something that was at this low ABV.
Mhm.
And Andrew's right. There's still weight to it. There's still
Yeah.
robustness there. It's crazy.
I mean, I think if I was gonna like, if you look at some of those Ben Romick 40-year-olds, I'm pretty sure some of those over time have been fairly low. Maybe I'm wrong on that.
I
There
think
there
they're
has
used.
been something lately that was really low ABV that I was like, man, that's incredible.
I think the Ben Romicks were like 57.9, something else. I
Mhm.
think they were pretty
So they're very limited. Tal was just mentioning they only have 4 bottles of 30, and there's also a 35-year-old. The 35-year-old was not in the tasting budget, but for those of you who are just slightly under the budget to stay at the Aberturret house, those 35s I'm sure are pretty special too. I don't almost don't want to move on from these two, but I do think we need to move on to the speed round here.
I gotta say, like I'm gonna give myself a pat on the back for the order because I'm pretty happy with putting the peated ones up front and having these ones last.
Yeah, Evan, I think there have been times where we have rightly or
Question my
wrongly
sanity.
disparaged you for the order of the whiskeys in the lineup because Evan does take it upon himself to determine the lineup, and I would say 9 times out of 10 you knock it out of the park. Every once in a while we're like, what the hell? And you're not there for us to chastise in person, so we have to do it behind your back, which is kind of cowardly and shameful.
I usually try and save the what the hell orders for the SMWS tastings, but
And rightly so. All right. I was just doing a quick scan to see if there was anything I wanted to talk about. I mean, I think before we go and do our speed round, I think what's interesting to just really sort of recap about the distillery is that it's an independent distillery. Used to be part of the Edrington Group, was part of the Edrington Group for a wee while. Was the home of famous grouse from 2002 until presumably when Lalique took over. They had a famous cat named Towser. There's still a statue there today. Towser the cat, I believe, has a Guinness World Record. It is believed to be the most murderous cat of mice and presumably rats in history, according to the Guinness Book of World Records. So you can go there. The Towser statue is still there. And actually, the one and only time I went to Glenturret, which I must admit was at least 15 years ago, maybe more, um, there was a cat there. Which at one point, Kurt, back me up on this. Didn't the Scottish government try to outlaw distillery cats at some point in time? Like some of
I don't
their,
know.
yeah. Because I know there was one at Balvenie and they're like, don't take a photo of it. I'm like, why? They're like, because we're not supposed to have a cat here. Um, but anyway, uh, we don't need to go. Uh,
29,000 mice? Was somebody on site breeding mice just to pad those stats a little bit?
so no, actually, Kurt, this is a fact. Now we were talking about this before the tasting. I wrote a 1-page article about Glenturret. I can't find it for some reason, which is really vexing me at this moment. But someone from Guinness Book of World Records went out there and they followed and observed the cat, I believe, for a week. Observed how many cats it killed, and then extrapolated over its lifetime, and that's how they arrived at that number.
You know what? I've put on a great show for a teacher or for whatever before, but that doesn't mean that's the metric I should be measured for the rest of my life. One good
There,
week is not who
there
I am.
probably should be a tapering at the beginning, at the end to get to closer to the right number. But I mean, I would have to imagine that in the slums of places like, I don't know, India or somewhere in Central America, there must be cats that were more successful, but no one bothered to kind of keep track of how many things it killed.
And I can say, with my oldest daughter living in the basement now, there are 4 cats in my house right now. And that is 28,899 more mice than the 4 cats in my house have taken care
Wow.
of.
Kurt, I have a dog that has actually, we had a dog when I was a kid that took great joy in catching mice. I don't think he intended to kill them, but he would catch them and then he would play with them to death, which I
well,
suppose at the end is the same thing.
I
So,
think they made a character out of him for a play, didn't he? Didn't
Yeah,
they?
all right, should we do our speed round here?
yeah.
Sounds good.
All right, I'm back to the 7-year-old, and what's interesting is I'm now getting notes of like hotel hot tub as opposed to like the chlorine from the water pool.
It's got a touch of bacon bits, but like the not the iodized ones, like the Maple Leaf brand,
Mhm.
like we actually cut up something that looked like bacon at one point and are calling it bacon bits.
Or like bacon strips.
Kind of.
Yeah, I can see that kind of real porky kind of thing going on there. Um, the peat's faded a little bit too, which is kind of nice. It seems just a little bit less sharp. Seems a little more balanced on the nose now.
The palate is malty, it is thick. Um, there's an intense like barbecue brisket,
Still spicy.
ashy, yeah, spicy intensity to it. It's not my whiskey, but man, there's a lot of flavor there.
Hmm.
Is it sherry casked or some sherry casking in it?
I
I
I
just got a
think
big grape note in the mid palate too.
I think there is some sherry cask. In fact, I'm pretty sure it is. Just going back to the details here. They just say American and European oak, but I think what they mean by that is sherry seasoned. Yeah, matured in American oak, but with a little bit of European. So I mean, there could be some ex-bourbon in there, but definitely when they drop that European in there, I think they're predominantly maturing in sherry. Kurt, is that grown on you, or is it still just a little too rough?
No, it's a little bit better than it was the first time. And don't get me wrong, man. Like when I'm saying these things, we're looking for things to talk about with these, and we're kind of dissecting. Doesn't mean it's a bad whiskey or that I'm not going to drink
Yeah.
it. But I am pointing out things in it that I don't necessarily love, and that I think is maybe just how we technically got to that. So for me, like almost everything's like singing in the right key for these first two, but there's definitely an off note on the palate that I find with that slightly acrid.
Mhm.
But that's my palate. Make it right.
Well,
Kind of goes into like a Nutella roasted hazelnut thing
mm.
on the 10 that I quite like on the finish there.
Kurt, I was just going to say maybe as a trainee first responder, it's just that's a trauma response for you.
Could be. Could be.
All right, and Evan, 10-year-old. I'm now that I've made my little joke, I'm joining you on the 10-year-old. I kind of like the nose on that now.
Yeah.
Malt, peat, some fruit, a little bit of honey.
It's a balanced peated whiskey. Like it still has a spice there. It goes a little bit, well, a lot more chocolatey, in my opinion, versus the barbecue of youth, on the young one.
Yeah. More like a hickory stick kind of note.
Hmm.
I can be friends, but not lovers with this one. Again, I quite like a lot about it, but the palate, the
So
mid
you,
palate, it's
Kurt, I take it from that you'd give it a big hug, but you wouldn't like lock lips. Is that what you're trying to say?
I like, yeah, I'm gonna leave that one.
First base only.
All right. Triplewood. Man, there's the tart fruits on that is kind of crazy. It's still there. Like,
That just like brings back like fun memories of young Aaron, at whiskey festivals and trying it out before it was 10 years old for me.
in some ways, this is like the natural wine of all the whiskeys in the lineup tonight. Yeah. It's kind of and this is the natural minimal intervention whiskey in the lineup. Despite being the triple wood, I mean the oak impact on this is pretty minimal. It's rather spirit forward, which I like. It's letting you see some of that funkiness in the spirit. I mean, my taste would be for something a little older and a bit more mature, but yeah, there's some grapey notes in there. There's some nice fruits in there. It's a little bit cheesy too, which is probably from that long fermentation. Um, if this is the DNA, I mean, I still think it probably
Mhm.
drinks best 15 and up, but man, I think Glenturret's got some interesting spirit.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the finish. It goes just a little bit spirity and kind of gets truncated on the finish for me. Where it just sort of like abruptly ends versus when we get into the older stuff.
Mhm.
I'd be hard pressed to think that grapey note is a DNA thing, though. I would think that's just more from sherry whisking,
Yeah.
personally.
Oh, I agree the grapey note is that, but I think the acidity and the fruit, I think is the core.
I
Yeah.
think you nailed the acidity because I'm having trouble getting around that now.
Yeah.
I think that is probably the key. I think I want to go back through a bunch of other carrots and see.
Mhm. Well, I mean, I
With
want to know more about, well, let's just quickly, and I know this is going down a rabbit hole, but I mean, I think that's partly why people come to these tastings. Let's just quickly transition to Ardbeg Day for a second, because even though the Ardbeg Day release this year is not a whiskey I would want to drink on a regular basis, I think it's one of the most interesting releases they've done in a long time because they made a substantial change to how they make their spirit and did that by essentially concentrating the sugars, reducing the amount of water, bringing up the specific gravity of both the sugars in the wash, but also the actual alcohol, sorry, the sugars in the mash, but also the alcohol in the wash before they even distilled it. And they kind of did something, they made this really fruity, funky spirit that we've not seen before. I mean, we don't know a lot about Glenturret. We don't know like what kind of yeast they use. We know they have long fermentations, but not much more. There's wooden washbacks. Um, I'd be interested to know like what is behind that kind of tart acidity that they have in their spirit, because it's not something I think I've seen in a lot of other distillates.
I think one of the ones I have noticed a bit of acidity too, and this plays right into what both you and Evan have been talking about tonight. Young Aaron, I find always has a bit of acidity to it.
Which has a long fermentation as well. So, and in wooden washbacks. I mean, so those two things kind of track, which is interesting. Okay, 12-year-old.
That's just some really nice fruit on the nose.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit of Terry's chocolate orange and like nectarines and
Wow. You know, that's very drinkable. I think the price point, $105 on this is very good. I mean, hit this up against like Glendronach 12-year-old,
Mhm.
Macallan 12 double cask, or Sherry Oak. I think this would probably outshine either of those quite easily.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's a little less one note versus especially I like the Macallan Sherry Oak, but it's just all toffee butterscotch.
yeah. And almost double the price.
Yep.
So,
I think the nose alone on this one is worth the price of admission.
mhm.
Mhm.
Out slightly less than the nose for me, but not even remotely a detraction. I would pay that price happily, and I think it's priced higher. I hate to say it,
Yeah.
see that, but I think the quality speaks to a slightly higher.
Yeah.
The
So,
the nose right now, it's like you dumped some Earl Grey tea into some apple cider.
hmm. Well, Evan, riffing on that for the palate is a little bit of like the Village Ice Cream Guides Mint mixed with their Earl Grey tea ice cream. You get a little bit of both.
Nice.
That
So,
Earl
yeah,
Grey is a good note. Um,
it was a good
Earl
note.
Grey less a little bit of the florality I get there. Not that Earl Grey is overly floral, but a little bit muted there. But that's a really good note.
Yeah. Okay, 15. A little thicker, a little more syrupy, a little more chocolatey.
Yeah, tons of chocolate on that. I like the 50.4. Like it's got some nice spice notes. It doesn't go like just cloyingly sweet. It still has a bit of dryness to it.
Mhm. Yeah, palate's interesting on this. Some nice layers to it, a nice balance to it, nice complexity. I think my only knock on this is the price. I mean, we're pushing 205,
Mhm.
and it's got some tough competition for that. Like Ben Romick 15 is what, 130, $135, something like that. Might even gone down slightly. Lalique 15, which is probably a little dumpier and not quite as elegant as this, but 140 somewhere in that range price wise. Uh, I'd kind of like to see this down in the 150 range, but it's I think it's quite well put together.
This might sound slightly confusing on the heels of what you said. Um, the 12 has some notes in it. I could push that price point. I don't think a 12 should be. And I 100% agree with you. This is a really awesome, like really great palette. Evan suggested it or flat out said it. I don't know. The palette weight on this one, like the ABV, is a really great delivery strength for it.
Mhm.
The price is steep for sure. No two ways about it.
Yeah.
You're right. $150 is kind of where this should be, I think, positioned.
Yeah.
But that's a good whiskey, really good whiskey.
Well, and I think we have to couch this with like, and I think this is where there's some truth. Like, I genuinely don't think this distillery has huge volumes of what they're selling. I mean, but I mean, for
That
long
doesn't,
term,
and I don't mean that disrespectfully. I just mean any distillery, whether it's a new distillery starting up or a distillery with, shallow coffers, like think of Glenglassaugh when it's like 400
yeah.
casks of whiskey, right? It's not my job to subsidize you. So
Mhm.
you need to find another way to make your money back. Don't overcharge me because you don't have deep enough stocks or because,
Yeah.
oh, we've only got enough for this much of it, so we're going to charge for it. That's the Glenfarclas model for their family casks and stuff like that. That's a bogus model. That whole, like, just because we only have a little bit, we're charging you through for it. Not cool.
Yeah. As the business owner, I'm probably somewhere in between on that
No, you're
argument.
not. No, you're not. I'm going to come out in
Well,
your defense on this one, Andrew, in front of a
yeah,
room full of people. You are the first one to say, I like, we talk all the time about, oh, you could take a bigger margin on this, or,
yeah.
you don't have to discount this Springbank for people, whatever, and you still do. So I
Mhm.
respectfully disagree. You're not that guy
Well,
that's taking the extra
but I
points.
but I see the two sides to it too. So you're right. There's a lot of times where we have that, and I don't do that because that's not how I run my business. But I also recognize that there are like, let's say you bottle uh 3,000 bottles of 15. I don't know what the actual number was that they bottled. And if you're distributing that around the world, that's not going to last very long. And if that's all you can do, then you can make a legitimate argument that maybe you can price it slightly higher. And I'm not saying gouge.
Yeah,
Um, I think the tricky thing is just as good as this is, I think this is the other side to occur, which is leaning more towards what you're saying is what else can you get for that amount of money? And as good as it is, do you like it enough that you're okay with the price because you know that there's not a lot of other things you could get for the same amount of money? And I think with this one, it's a little high, but it's not like outrageously high, I think is my point.
and I'll qualify that too by saying it depends what you're looking for and how deep your stores are at home in a way. I don't need to buy a lot of whiskey. I don't drink a ton of whiskey. So I'm okay paying this price for this because I like the profile and because but I don't think as a rule that price is right. I'm willing to bend, but I
Yeah.
don't think everybody is willing to bend. And I'll
Yeah.
also go back to what you just said. You've only got 3,000 bottles of it or whatever. That argument holds a little bit more water if we're talking about a 30, 40, 50-year-old whiskey where that the supply of whiskeys of that age are so finite that that price kind of holds across the board. But when we're talking about a 15-year-old, that's a pretty basic age statement across the brands. That's pretty standard. And the 205 is a pretty high price point. Found a lot of
Well,
companies.
this might be a good transition to the 25 then, because um, like their 25-year-old is in that range of only a like couple hundred bottles released a year. So I think Evan was also kind of hoping that we would get stuck out of the mud and keep the wheels turning here.
I
Um,
gave up. I just moved on to the 25.
and how is it?
It is really good. I was really thinking that the 15 that I don't know, the 15 is really well done. I quite like it. The 25 and the 30 are just in a different echelon. I can't remember what I did with the votes on this one, but I kind of hope I split them to make them separate votes in the lineup, but I don't think I did.
The 25 has some really nice, like old cognac, Armagnac notes on the palate that I really like.
Yeah, that's a good call.
Oh man,
In
that
some ways, it actually comes off as older than the 30, and I think that's kind of where Kurt was going there.
mhm. It I like both. I think the 25 though is like next level.
Mhm.
Um and I mean it's 2025 now, so maybe we'll see a release from 2025 of this at some point this year. But again, 210 bottles only released of this. So not a lot of it in the world. You can have almost three of these. No, you can have more than three of these for the price of one Macallan 25. Like to
Done.
throw that stat out there whenever I can.
The only knock I can give this whiskey is it's slightly decayed after an hour and a half in the
Yeah.
glass or whatever, because it is only 41%. But I don't even care because it wouldn't sit in the glass that long,
Yeah.
and it was poured that 41% just fine. It's just that's not high enough to stop an hour station.
Mhm.
How does
Stunner.
this compare to like older Delmores stylistically?
Actually, that's not a bad, Evan, I was thinking about that more with the 30-year-old.
Mhm.
But yeah, it actually reminds me a little bit of some of those old 40-year-olds at 40%, which were really tropical. The sherry's balanced. Back when you could get a 40-year-old Delmore for 800 bucks or whatever it was, back in the long, long ago in the before times. Um, yeah, I mean, this is so drinkable. Like it's not as intense or rich as the Compass Box General, but it's kind of in that wheelhouse a little bit. And it's so easy drinking. And I think Kurt nailed it. Like it's not held up as well in the glass, but that doesn't matter. If you had a glass of this, you wouldn't leave it in there long enough for it to sort of oxidize. You'd be crushing it.
So how's that 30?
Because we keep drawing parallels to other old whiskeys with these ones, and some of our chat group here is as well. This one actually reminds me of those Ronnie's Reserve
Mhm.
Glenrot.
Ooh,
A couple of them that remind.
Another Edrington distillery.
yeah. We we should totally do a virtual tasting that's just called Edrington's X's.
I think so.
Mhm.
Glen Roth's is like an on again, off again relationship with them, so I think it counts.
Have you guys watched that TV show, Your Friends and Neighbors?
No.
First of all, you should watch it. Second, I think we might be able to play around with something in there. It's a little bit incestuous, a little bit, you know, trading spouses kind of thing. So yeah, we can do something there. Yeah, I mean, going back to the Dalmore comment, I mean this one reminds me a little bit more of Dalmore than the 25 does. It's
Mhm.
like that Methuselah sherry finesse. I mean, and I made fun of it. Like, I will admit, I made fun of it. I've made fun of Dalmore a lot. But I mean, Richard Patterson is a very, very good blender. Um, every older bottling I ever had, Kurt's looking at me kind of funny, but every older bottling of Dalmore I ever had was gorgeous. Um, did I like the price or the fact there might be caramel in it? No. But I thought there was always a lot of elegance there. Kurt's looking dumbfounded now, but
Yeah, Andrew, I am, because so many of the really gorgeous old Dalmore were left alone. They'd be like single cask, not single cask necessarily, but one cask type and stuff.
but they often had that Methuselah sherry finesse, Kurt, even if it was just for like 6 months.
That's fine, but Patterson's MO has always been like cask upon cask, tons of wood influence, bury the spirit in wood. And I hate to say it, an unapologetic cigar smoker with that religious of a habit, you can't tell me your palate isn't compromised to the point where you're looking for an intensity of flavors that work with that. And as a cigar guy myself, sporadically, a handful a year, sweet works really well with that. So I think that's why he drives Delmar.
Yeah. Um, I don't disagree with you. And I mean, we've privately talked previously about people who are master blenders that are chain smokers or that are whiskey reviewers and are chain smokers, and like how can they possibly have a good enough palate to do that? But like Kurt, when you look back, I mean, I remember like the old 40-year-old that came in the ridiculous leather box that was like a book, or the Astrum, the Aurora, the 40 and 45. Those were all spectacular whiskeys. And they were in these ridiculous finishes, but they were always elegant. And I never thought any of those. I mean, I would love to go back and try them. It's never going to happen. I thought all of those were great. I'm not going to touch the like, the King Alexander or the 15 or the cigar malt, which I think are like all way over oaked whiskeys. But to me, that was like the heyday of old Dalmore's. Like even the 65-year-old he bottled, which I got to try, and the 72 were spectacular. Like they were absolutely spectacular whiskeys.
So how many bottles of any of those would have come out?
Well, I mean, that's a whole
Rather
other,
small hand, right?
pardon me,
A rather small hand in most cases,
very,
right?
very, very small number.
Especially if you look at something like the Constellation series. Some of those were less than 100 bottles per.
I didn't get to try a lot of those because, yeah,
I think I still have some samples. You and I, maybe one or two others, can sit down and try. The only point I'm trying to make here is when we want to refer to him as master blender, like saying he's a great master blender. Is he actually doing anything other than maybe a finish here or there on some of those? When he's actually blending things, they're typically the younger ones with a lot of casks going together, and none of us like those.
yeah.
Just,
Well,
just I'll
young,
leave that.
okay, young Dalmore, we are agreed. Um, Old Dalmore pre 2012. I think we have to continue that conversation at some point in time.
Delmore tasting.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know where we're gonna get them other than just whatever samples you or I might have lying about.
I don't think I own a single bottle of Delmore.
Can't you just scrape him off walls from where he's done tastings, or?
Or in the case of
Pick up
my first Burns dinner, the back of his host, well, or of the rep, who tripped at the moment he threw the water and ice, so it went right on his back. I
Nice.
mean, you couldn't have planned that and it had it look funnier than it
Yeah.
actually did.
Weirdest WCB report ever, I'm sure.
Yeah. All right. Okay. I think we got way off track here. So we got to bring it back around full circle. So Evan, do you want to fire up the poll here? Because we got some voting to
Sure.
do.
I think you have to, your host.
Oh, I got to do it. All right, here we go. So probably best if I don't do the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society poll. All right, it's up. While that's up, Kurt, Evan, have you guys picked your three favorites for tonight's? Kurt's ready to roll. Kurt, since you were so confident right off the bat, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, it's no brainer for me. Sure, I don't even have to say them. You can for me. Number 3, the 15. Number 2, the 30, and number.
Okay.
But I do want to say I want to qualify that with, as much as I would unequivocally say Loch Lomond is the most improved distillery in Scotland over the last few years. This is a massive improvement, and I'm blown away by what's done here. A couple of these are a little bit underripe, but man, this is so much better than I remember Turret being.
Kurt, I think the problem is our baseline was that trio of peated,
Yeah,
triple wood, and something else that Douglas Lang put out, which were just not great.
Yeah, but look at the silkscreen stuff that Loch Lomond had that they had to recover from too.
Evan, the first ever triple silk screen printing on bottles ever.
I know Andrew Gray was so excited about it.
He was really excited. All right, Evan, your top three?
I'm just going to take the 25 and 30 off there because they're just too easy to pick. 15's number one for me. I'll take the 12 as well, and then I'm going to go with the 7-year-old peated. It's both the peated are really fun. I just love those barbecue notes that I get on the 7.
Evan, you are such a man of the people. I love. I thought for sure you were going to go 10-year-old, but I love that you went 7. It's like it's so
Yeah,
true to form, like Lacheg, Ardmore.
yeah. The proletariat only drinks like $150 whiskey.
I mean, going back to the 7-year-old now, I'm getting hints of a Thrusk. So, like in some ways, it makes perfect sense.
Well, Hinsaboth Rusk, I think that's the first time that's ever been used.
That
Ever.
that
Period.
that should be a Scotch Malt Whiskey Society tasting note,
Yeah,
like a whiskey that's not a Thrusk called Hints of a Thrusk.
yeah.
Um, I hate to do
Because
this,
nobody
but
can
I
say
think
they're wrong.
what's that, Kurt?
Because nobody can say they're wrong. Everybody's like, huh? What's our threats like? What?
Uh, my votes are identical to Kurt's 25,
Yeah.
30, 15. The 12's right up there. I think honorable mention for me goes to the 10. I quite like that. Um, but yeah, I think this is an interesting brand. Um, be interesting to see. I mean, the nice thing about this is, in theory, we can do this all over again when the 2025s come in. Because I'd like to see how different they are, and the 25 and the 30 really impressed. So I quite like those. All right, should we check in on the poll? Most people have voted. So far, not everyone did, and I know we had a big group of people um, who turned their camera off early in the tasting. So I'm guessing they just did their own tasting. But the 25 was the clear favorite, followed by the 15 and 30. And then for second favorite, this is cool. Everybody got a vote. How about that? Every single whiskey, somebody picked that as their second favorite for second favorite. And Evan's cheeky third question: should Glenturret Distillery be considered the oldest in Scotland? And the questions, the answers to the question were: who cares if it was closed, then reopened many times over the past 250 years? It was established in 1763, and that is what mattered. There can be no grousing about it or about that. Well done, Evan, like that. Oldest distillery, my foot. Hosh Distillery operated until 1875 until it was renamed Glenturret. A fact. Can't deny that. I call shenanigans. Little Mill would be the first and oldest licensed distillery in Scotland if it had been burnt down in 2004. And to be fair, abandoned before that. What else? Oh, Evan, these just keep going. As a religious zealot belonging to the cult of Peat, I only recognize distilleries that were founded after 1779. Nothing existed until God gave us Bowmore. I think I would have to vote for that one. If I had a vote, I think I probably would have had to vote for that. And what about Milton Distillery? Sure, it was returned or renamed Strathisle in 1951, but it was known as Milton before that. Truly a paradise lost. Oh, Evan, well done. Well done on those cheeky third questions. I I mean, I don't think those were your funniest ever, but I think they were your wittiest in a while. So quite like those.
Thank you.
Yeah. Uh we're nearly done here, and I'm feeling pretty good other than the fact that I don't have any 25, 30, or 15 left. I
Yeah.
I think we're at an end.
Hmm.
Anything more to say?
Impressive.
Uh, I hope they keep the 15 at a high strength, and hopefully they do an age-stated peated cast strength or high strength at some point.
All right. Well,
Actually, that one last point there on that 15, you're right. So maybe just a little bit more forgiveness for that price point. 50.8 is a little bit more respectable than almost any other. So
Mhm.
well done to
yeah, agreed. Well, Kurt, Evan, thank you. I want to say thank you to Tala and DRC Imports, the importer who helped with the cost of some of the bottles tonight, keeping the price friendly. Thank you all for attending, including the group of 12 who turned their camera off after 3 minutes of us blathering on. But yeah, I hope you all had a great night tonight. Phil and Sue, nice to see you again. We got people almost coast to coast. Talk to you again soon. Have a good night.
See you guys.